Hello, everybody. Welcome to Caspian Policy Center. Good morning to our audience in Washington and good evening to our audience in the Caspian region. Thank you for joining our important event today at the Caspian Policy Center. I'm Afghan Nifty with the Caspian Policy Center. Today, we will be hosting a discussion in collaboration with the U.S. Agency for International Development and the embassies of Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Turkey, and Uzbekistan, bringing together policy experts from U.S. government agencies and private companies, as well as senior business representatives from the countries of the Caspian region to discuss the infrastructure development within the Blue Dot network. This is actually our second event on this issue. First, we had on September 9 with the policy and government representatives from the region and the United States. Now we are bringing together the business representatives for this virtual roundtable. I'm glad to see a lot of attendance from the business community. We will focus on private sector engagement and explore the vital role of the business community plays in strengthening regional integration through infrastructure and commerce. Using a roundtable format, the event will encourage dialogue and discussion between the agencies overseeing U.S. participation in the Blue Dot network, government ministries in the Caspian region, and private enterprises. We have an impressive line of speakers today from both US and the region. Here I'd like to stop and I would like to turn over to Paul Berkowitz, the new Deputy Assistant Administrator for Asia at USAID, for his keynote remarks. Mr. Berkowitz, floor is yours. Thank you. Once again, welcome to our roundtable.
Afghan, this is Kausharha. I might jump right in place of Paul. We've got some meetings going on here, and if you don't mind, I'll take over his point, and also I'll have to leave at 10 o'clock, Afghan. So I want to get to the crux of the matter, and we can have the discussion, and perhaps I'll turn it over the moderating to you even after that, and my friend Caleb McCurry from DFC may very well stay to the very end. So if that's okay with you, I'll go right ahead. If that's okay.
No problem, good to have you, and I'm glad you made it today.
Yes. No. Thank you again. And once again, I want to thank the Caspian Policy Center, yourself, the ambassador, for hosting this event. I'm delighted to see my old friend Taleh's name up there from Baku as one of the panelists. So that's outstanding. And I again appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Blue Dot network. So I think the issue is relatively simple, and I think nobody knows it more and more sort of importantly and closely and more comprehensively than our panelists and our audience, the private sector, which is that there is globally, especially among the emerging economies, there's a tremendous demand for infrastructure and need for infrastructure around the world. When people look at it, they talk about in trillions of dollars, whether it be Asian Development Bank or Inter-American Development Bank or African Development Bank, trillions of dollars annual demand for infrastructure. Now, we know that to meet that demand and meet it responsibly, we need to mobilize the private sector. So the question really is, how do we match this tremendous demand for infrastructure with the needed supply of investment for infrastructure? We also know that a lot of infrastructure really has to have some public funding and support. But if we're going to truly meet this big demand, we'll need to mobilize the private sector and the free markets to meet it. Without that, we'll always be fine. Sort of more deficient in our goals than otherwise. So that's the kind of crux of the problem. So to that end, how can we mobilize more private sector? So that's the other important issue is, especially for big private investors, whether they be institutional investors, the pension funds, or they are at some point slightly more conservative, I think, on elements of it, than you may find other folks that are going in the stock market and others. But the conservative nature of that kind of investment also will have to be met with some not only good financial apparatus and infrastructure, transparency and others to say, hey, here's the money going in, here's what the terms are, here's how it's going to be run, and here's how the return on investment is going to be done. But at the same time, also building upon a lot of reputational issues. So a lot of reputational issues whether infrastructure has been done right, and it is for all of the people's benefit. The not only, especially the local employment, the local economy, the national economy, the regional economy, and everybody benefits from. And we have learned these lessons over the last 20, 30 years. Especially, I think the great examples would be the World Bank. I mean, its infrastructure earlier on working on big dams or other issues. And it was quite evident that you had to take in consideration some of the environmental issues. You also had to take in consideration local social and cultural issues, so that when you were able to do it, the infrastructure project both are politically very, eye-catching and important for a lot of political leaders. But at the same time, with the same token, they can also be a big hotspot for controversy and dispute on how and whether one or the other community was left out. So building on all these things, we also have to find out that we don't do over regulations and bind up the private sector from getting in. You cannot make infrastructure so cumbersome that you won't do it. So those are the complexities that we have in looking at and analyzing why we're, what are some of the sort of issues we will have to address to facilitate greater sort of private investment in this critical sector. So one, again, important thing is there's some surety and transparency on financing. That, I think, is the heart of it for anybody putting money in. So knowing what the terms are, what we're going to get out, how all this works out. The other one is also that it is a not infrastructure oftentimes are also a economic but also a social good in some ways. People use it, and so it improves and does not detract us from our other responsibility, whether it be environment, social, cultural. And then critically, that it does play a very direct role in improving and bolstering local economy, local employment, and also national sovereignty. That's, the infrastructure really is. I mean, it makes a country proud, whether it be a Hoover Dam, interstate highways, the railroad connections that work around. It makes people country proud. Like you see the pride, particularly in the Caucasus region around Caspian, the railroad, everybody, I mean, there's a lot of pride when people talk about it connecting between Georgia and Azerbaijan and Turkey and other places. So that's legitimate. I mean, you got Taleh talking about the Ayat port. I mean, it's a question of immense pride to say, hey, and he and I went there and saw it, I think, with Fred Starr when we were still looking at how many berths is going to be in the big logistics centers. So in addressing all this, I think the United States and Japan and Australia came together and we said, let's start an initiative that talks about and emphasizes the best practices in infrastructure, not putting new burdens, but let's looking at what we already are doing and the widely agreed best practices for infrastructure, and how can we elevate the standing and the propriety of good infrastructure. Let's brand them with something. Good infrastructure is like a blue dot infrastructure, and the blue dot, I'm not going to tell you where it comes from because I want to leave that to my good friend Caleb McCurry from DFC to talk about the genesis of that particular thing. So let's brand it, and by so branding, and then we'll have to come up with a system of actually perhaps certifying it in a way that meets the needs of what we addressed earlier, whether it be transparency of funding or meeting of the social obligations, in a way to mobilize more private sector, and do so with, this is the kind of the crux of the matter, do so without putting more burdens on private sector, do so to facilitate private investment in it, not burdening it. This is whenever you have a government person talking about, I'm going to do this in social responsibility environment, more private sector people are going to look and say, okay, I'm looking at what more do I need to do. So I think it's important that we adhere to best practices, elevate that in an important branding and certification system, with the object of encouraging more private investment into that particular sector. So in practical terms, and we'll talk a little Q&A, and I'll turn to other colleagues per se. In practical terms, if you are receiving, funds from DFC or Exim Bank from United States or most other sort of development bank, whether it be EBRD as well, you already are doing pretty much everything that would be comporting into the best practices. So you already are sort of doing and meeting the elements that you would have in the Blue Dot. But it is to elevate that and to make sure that as we do more investment, we'll probably ask for that. We're trying to brand it, and we're trying to leverage that into more money into the sector. So that's the objective. We're trying to shape this particular initiative. So it's very useful at this moment that after we have the political commitment to do the right infrastructure and get more private investment, that we talk to the private sector just like we are doing today and learn and hear from you as to how we can help in shaping this initiative to meet the needs of the private sector as we go forward. So that's the short point and pitch, and really look forward to having the discussions from our colleagues and sort of being able to talk about it. So with that, I'll turn it over to my good friend Caleb McCrary if he's on it. Okay, so Caleb also seems like it's a busy day in Washington, D.C. So with that, I'll turn it to who's the next person now. Then Steve Dowd, if you are there from EBRD, we'll turn to you. Otherwise, it's back to you, Efkan, to run it through whoever else you want next. Over.
Yeah, I am here. Good morning.
Steve.
Yes. Yes, it's Steve Dowd, EBRD. And I thought I would very quickly just, the EBRD, as you've already pointed out, is quite active in the region. The aggregate EBRD investment in CPC countries since 2012 amounts to almost 12 billion. 63% of the 2019 investment in CPC countries was in the infrastructure sector. EBRD investments in CPC countries has grown by 112% from 2012 to 2019. From Azerbaijan to Tajikistan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Uzbekistan, pretty much all the countries involved, with the exception of Afghanistan, the EBRD is well established and very active. And the US has encouraged and will continue to encourage the EBRD to invest in the Caucasus and Central Asian regions. We should pursue any effort to integrate the private sector into sustainable national infrastructure plans in order to maximize EBRD participation without diluting its private sector focus. Again, the EBRD is private sector focused. Together, we should socialize the BDN concept, not only with the EBRD, but also with the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and other development banks in order to maximize the likelihood of participation by US companies to promote high quality, sustainable infrastructure. And as you also correctly pointed out, the EBRD is already well aligned with BDN principles on quality and ethical responsibility. So the EBRD is an existing, experienced platform that really promotes the US point of view, and we need more US companies to engage with the EBRD and its sister multilateral development banking partners. I'm hoping that the Blue Dot Network can be a springboard, and anything we can do at the EBRD to facilitate that, we are happy to do. I do have one specific question. You asked in with a question, and I'm curious, what is the Blue Dot Network's budget, so that I can kind of understand where it's going directionally? Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions later.
Okay, Steve, I'll answer that question, but I think I'll go through the people so they can have their speeches, and then I'll come back and make sure that I answer that particular. So over to the CEO, Mr. Bella Ferenczi, if I've said it right, Mr. Bella.
Mr. Jari, you said it right. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and hi everybody around the globe. Look, being from the private sector, it's on order that we can contribute with our comment to this. Well, you know that G is operating in 185 countries around the world, and in Caspian region since 1920. We are very active in all the countries that are supporting today's event, from Central Asia, name it, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. These are focused, the strongest economies, if you would say. In the same way, very active in countries which are very much in infrastructure modernization need, like Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. So there are lots of projects there. And I think what you said at the beginning, very right. The demand for infrastructure modernization in these countries is tremendous. Okay, so the number which was quoted right now by Stephen regarding EBRD, the 12 billion in the decade, it's a huge number. But I would not, and without knowing the exact number, but I would say that the demand would be tenfold multiple of this amount in these countries for infrastructure needs. So there is a lot to be built and a lot to be enhanced to really use the potential of these economies. So I think we are operating in a slightly different sectors than what was on the general agenda of the VDN, because for us the focus is the energy sector, healthcare, and aviation. But I would say these are as fundamental. I would say even energy is the backbone of any economy. So you can have roads and ports, but if there is no electricity, like for example Uzbekistan, which is an electricity deficit country, then you have trouble. Then the railroad is, I was sitting between Bukhara and Tashkent on a railway for 3 hours waiting until the electricity comes back. So just recently. So that's why I think it's very important. And what we are trying to do is to bring the most efficient and up-to-date technologies to these countries, to support the countries to accelerate their growth and build the world in these countries' economies that work, and ultimately improve people's life in these countries. We have obviously our own company-to-country strategy for each country. We are trying to partner with the countries, but we cannot make or change the weather in these countries. So if you just think about it, I would say that this discussion and the initiative in general.
Bella, I might just request that you speak slightly louder because I think I'm having a little trouble, and I hope other people can hear you as well. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I wanted to say that this discussion and the initiative is very timely. I can tell you that I was living for the last 10 years with the region, and we as a US company always suffered from the fact that from actually the facts that this initiative wants to tackle, there were no quality projects. So it was very hard, and I'm sure EBRD would confirm it. It was difficult to find really quality projects to finance. And the second, it was the legislative environment was not existing. Somebody's more ahead, like Kazakhstan. Uzbekistan has put together a PPP legislation very quickly, but many things are not there to make projects bankable in its sense. So as a result, I think it's a very timely discussion and very much needed to bring into the financing sector of these projects transparency, clear rules of understanding how it works. And, you know, there is one thing what was mentioned, I was just reading through the charter, right, that it will bring in an evaluation criteria which make these projects for everybody very clear that the quality of them. But at the same time, it might be more expensive and having a much more long-term sort of benefit for the given country. And what I can say is that what I observe is these countries are normally focused on a very short-term, very severe needs, which needs to be resolved. So we need to bridge this. We need to educate all the stakeholders what's the benefit in this initiative for them and why it's better to do this way rather than the way they used to. Okay, so in the past, US was not really playing too much role in the financing in this region. We were doing some small things, but not too much. environment itself was pushing the countries directly to the bilateral relationships with China, Russia, Japan, you name it, right? And bilateral concessional arrangements are, most cases, non-transparent, are direct negotiations, no tenders, et cetera, so which excludes many US companies or Western companies from the play to start with. So I think the environment very much needs this initiative. And my question, to end on the question, would be how quickly we can operationalize it. It obviously linked to the earlier question on the budget. We know it's a cycle, right? And economies have a certain capability of capacities to bear exposures. Kazakhstan plateaued in the last 5 years, right? If you look at it, there's not too much going on in infra projects. Uzbekistan is growing on steroids nowadays, but it will reach soon the limits it can do. So the question is how quickly we can make it work. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Bella. I really appreciate the points you made about the timeliness of its nature, but also the somehow, there needs to be this is an education and outreach element to this, which is very important because one of the important elements of Blue Dot infrastructure is to focus on the entire life cycle of the infrastructure project, not just on the front end, not just on the ribbon cutting, the big announcement, and a kind of a road or a bridge that is built, then but if it's not of substandard, then it sort of spends more money and we're spending in repair. So the life cycle issue of a good infrastructure, which GE does a lot of, I think is an important element. The other is the infrastructure is not limited just to transportation sector. So I think a lot of stuff that you talked about is very much part of it. Energy, absolutely. Even if you're looking at sort of health and other systems which are involved physical structures that are all part of the picture. It's not necessarily just roads and bridges, even though they may get it. So appreciate your point. I think your question about operationalization and Steve's about budget, I'll address it when we are done through the panel. So I think the next is great pleasure to see and invite my good friend Tale to talk about how he's changing the entire world and the across the Caspian Sea and linking to the Black and all the rest of it. So over to you, Tale.
Thank you, Dr. Arha. Good to see you. You were at the port, I think, in July or June of 2014, when it wasn't yet inaugurated, but now it is. And maybe I start with a little of a discussion about what's going on now and what we are likely to see in the next 10 years in our region as a whole. And in that context, how Blue Dot network is going to fit in the context of this development. Obviously, when we talk about the discussion about future infrastructure development, we are coming to a point where we are going to see major developments in what we call hub development. As it was in the past, obviously the major developments are going to take place in major localities or points, what we call in our lexicon, we call them 5-star hub. So these are the places where infrastructure in the future is going to be interlinked. So, for example, China's One Belt, One Road initiative obviously started inside of China. China first did development of its own infrastructure, and then they started linking domestic hubs first when they moved to link international hubs. So in the next 5 to 10 years, most likely you are going to see emerging 5-star hubs across Eurasia, which will be an interest for all major players to considering linking. So it will be about which kind of 5-star hub is going to play a dominant role in one or the other region and who is going to use it. Obviously, in this context, Blue Dot Network could also contribute in attracting private and international development bank funds into projects that they consider to be of a particular standard, which boils down to the issue of certification, obviously, for which, obviously, projects like ours, we are very much interested in this. Because in the next 5 years, the objective that stands in front of us is to make sure that a lot of terminals that exist in the port, they kind of brought in for operations of private sector or operators. To do so, obviously you need to attract private sector investors and private sector operators who also bring volumes and cargo. So in that sense, I think Blue Dot Network certification and some sort of a process that will apply to all these hubs that are going to emerge will be a big benefit for, in a way, a guiding map for any potential investors or private funds or developing funds when they choose which project or terminals or infrastructure development projects to invest in. So in that sense, I think this certification concept is quite important and we should follow that up. When we have done, especially in Azerbaijan, we have done a lot in the last 5 to 10 years on infrastructure development. So now we are moving in a way to the next stage of this, creating a hub and making foreign direct investment comes in, and you create a hub for international firms that are going to use this place as their major distribution center. Because we are located in the middle of 130 million people, a region that is not currently being served from inside. Most of the logistical services are provided from a distance, either from Dubai or from Moscow or from Istanbul. This is obviously, considering the developments that are going to take place in the next 10 to 20 years, you must be very close to your final client, customer. In less than 24 hours, you must deliver the ordered product. To be able to do so, you have to be closely located to a final destination. And obviously, standing in the middle of this region, Baku and Port of Baku is in a very advantageous position to do so. We have already acquired a number of certifications like ISO 9001-2015, OHSAS on HSE, and also we became the first eco-port, green port in our region, together with our Turkmen and Kazakh friends. We are expanding this experience also to the east, and we are now working closely with our Afghan and Uzbek friends, since they also have what we call dry ports, not necessarily sea, but dry ports. Conceptually, they are also logistic hubs. And we work very closely with our colleagues in the West, with Georgia and Turkey. And some of the hubs that I mentioned are naturally going to emerge in Turkey and Georgia as well. So our mission is, in a way, to make sure that we interconnect them and make sure these connections are feasible and also attractive for all investors who want to come in and to actually position themselves in the region. So I would stop on this, and if there are any questions related to the subject, I would be happy to address. Thank you.
Kosh, you need to unmute.
So thank you very much. So I would just want to sing Taleh's praises, so it was, the phone muted itself. But anyway, I think it's unusual to find a person of Taleh's competence and expertise, because not only he is one of the leading experts on this idea of the hub-based, this hub and nodes and interconnectedness in infrastructure, as he wrote his doctorate on it, but also then have the great opportunity and the honor to actually put it in practice as the key person for the development of one of the most modern and I think exemplary hubs, as he would put it, and ports within the region. So it's truly outstanding. And I think your point on this issue, Tale, just to say that, you know, these hubs would be really key Blue Dot Network sort of flagship or even sort of, you know, keystone projects, because that's where a lot of the infrastructure threads would come in play. And it's not only them, but it'll have huge multiplier effect. And you're absolutely right that, you know, if people who even talked about biogeography or others, that big cities and big hubs will be talking to each other more and more as we're going to go over in future world. So appreciate it. One of the quick things, and I'll come back to this, I think we need to look for key project and issues and testing them as to how best to do the certification. So I think I would put that as a premise here for perhaps follow up and saying, can the Baku Ayat port can be one of the test cases to look at, you know, a BDN branding and certification for hubs. So I think that that's something, let's develop that, given your great expertise and commitment to that end. A pleasure to now invite our Georgian colleague, Georgi. Over to you, Georgi.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think that Blue Dot Network is very nice idea, very noble idea, I think, and it will help us in different ways. First of all, I'd like to continue the subject which was mentioned by the Mr. Ziadov. I think that we Georgia consider ourselves as a hub as well for the South Caucasus and Central Asian landlocked countries. The goods that are moving from the west to the Central Asia and Azerbaijan, I mean, they are using the Georgian ports, and vice versa. The resources that comes from the Central Asian countries and South Caucasus using the same ports. We invest a lot. We try to improve the infrastructure. We try to enlarge our ports. But as it was mentioned by the Ziadov, even if we make the oasis in terms of the transit in our country, it's still one part of the route. So we are very happy, first of all, to see that the Baku port is enlarging. We see it as a hub, and we really agree that, and we believe that there will be quite a good connection between our hub and the hub on the Caspian Sea. So about the Blue Dot Network, I think that first of all, it will be quite helpful tool for, at least for Georgia, to attract the investors in the future, because I think that when we talk about the long-term money owners like pension funds and etc., we definitely need to have on the table something special, something proved by the very legitimate organization. And I think that the Blue Dot Network can be used that way. The second, which is quite interesting as well, is that, I mean, I was the head of investment agency for a long time. I've seen a lot of feasibility studies made by the foreign investors. And you know that some of the feasibility studies, if not all of them, takes 1 year, 1 year and a half. So I think that if Blue Dot Network will cover some of the subjects, which is actually in the feasibility study, so that potential investors, it will save the time. And I think that the time of the feasibility studies made by the potential investors will be reduced. I think this is one of the big plus. Also, I think that the other subject is awareness as an investment destination. We all talk about the small countries now, like Azerbaijan, Georgia. We are not the big country. You don't get a lot of information about our countries and our business climate and our structures and our taxes every day on the TV. I mean, you get only if something bad happens. So I think that what we do right now on the international level is we are fighting against the stereotype. When we talk about the business climate of Georgia, actually we are the one of the leaders in the Europe. And this is not the statement of the government. It's proved by the world international organizations like World Bank, doing business like Transparency International, Heritage Foundation, I don't know, Davos Economic Forum. Like 2 days ago, Fraser Institute published Economic Freedom of the World 2020, and we are number 8 in the world in economic freedom. So what I'm trying to say is that we have we have a quite good business climate, but we have a problem with the awareness. Not a lot of people know about it. And I think that the Blue Dot Network can be quite good tool for the awareness of the specific projects that we are going to do. Generally, infrastructure is very important for us. We are spending a lot of money right now in infrastructure. We have quite big projects, and there are the bigger projects in pipeline. Most of them, they are already financed by the quite strong IFIs, like EBRD, like EIB, ADB, and others. IFC is there. So I think that when we talk about the meeting the standards, we will try our maximum, but I think that we already have quite some level regarding that. So my question actually at the end is that generally, when this process can be started, what do you think, and what you are expecting from the countries who wants to participate in that? I mean, what can be the next steps from our side? Thank you.
Well, thanks for all the good questions. They're the exact questions I want. Can't wait to get back to all that. But let me ask one more panelist before I answer the question and what next. And so it's great pleasure to turn it over now to Anar Omarova from Kazakhstan. Over to you, Anar.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion. I think Blue Dot Network is a very timely initiative in our region. First of all, because all countries have been hit by coronavirus pandemic, and there are significantly less foreign investments coming into our countries right now. And budgets are not that great because of different reasons. I think Blue Dot Network will contribute a lot in our region if we could create a joint technical assistance fund, attract donor money to this fund, and finance feasibility studies for projects that link different countries and promote trade, cooperation in Central Asia and in Caspian region. Before I worked for 10 years in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development before I joined Astana International Financial Center. And the main problem in infrastructure projects was to find funds, first of all, to improve local legislation, for example, procurement legislation or PPP legislation, and to find funds for feasibility study. For example, in Kazakhstan, we had one project which is called Big Almaty Ring Road. Essentially, this project took more than 10 years to prepare. And finally, it has been signed recently. So I think Blue Dot Network could contribute a lot in this sense if we can find donor funds, establish a technical assistance fund, and finance various needs of countries in the Caspian region. In this respect, I have a question to you regarding funding availability from participants of Blue Dot Network, whether they will be able to contribute some donor money potentially to such vehicle.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. And I think what I'll do is, if it's okay with our host, I'll answer the questions that were raised and then perhaps turn over to our business representatives to the degree that they want to talk about and hear from them as to next round, and I'll just call them to see how things go. Okay, so I'm Efkan, you're writing to me. Somebody else wants to speak as well. Do you want me to answer questions and then go to the person, or you want to go directly right now?
Let's answer the question and then we can go to that person.
All right, thanks. So I think the key questions were related. Okay, so we asked what the budget is, what the funding is, how do we operationalize it, what are the next steps. So I think the important point on this is that we're trying to follow in making this thing happen for all the reasons of timeliness and meeting the demand and making it better so the supply and demand met. There are two important elements. There's sort of a political commitment that we need from countries, and then there's a technical side to the Blue Dot Network. So in the political side, it is really, really important, as people talked about, that more countries sort of are open to the idea of supporting and being champions of good infrastructure projects in their country, quality infrastructure projects, and the importance of private sector in those projects. So they need to be basically, you join Blue Dot Network politically commitment, you just put a sign up and say in your country and say, hey, we are open for business for quality infrastructure investments to the benefit of my entire country, and we should do it in transparent way so that we can find good infrastructure projects. So just like our GE colleagues were talking about, just like our both our Azeri and Georgian colleagues were talking about, so that's one part, and so we're leading that both through the G7 track and through the 3Cs track and the CPC, and I'll come out and ask and meet with you. That's one. The second part is the technical side, as Tale and others mentioned, of sort of, the certification and the operationalization of it. So within that concept, it is important, and it's a good concept to certify and to brand, but it's also not an easy, it's a difficult one, because you want to hit the balance just right. You want to make the certification process in a way which is sort of, starts perhaps on online. It is an element of sort of self-certification that perhaps has an auditing mechanism in it, that it builds on existing sort of standards and principles, doesn't create new standard and principle that works on existing, like the IFC performance standards, where, the DFC standards and others that follow, and do it in a way which also addresses what our, Georgian colleagues said and others, that it addresses and moves the infrastructure investment. It hastens it, it quickens it, not slows it down and puts extra burden on it, makes it like the feasibility study, like also the technical assistance side of stuff. So though the countries that are open and put the sign saying, hey, we are open for business for good quality infrastructure investments, also at the same time, if they agree to this and we go through this process, there ought to be some technical assistance issues that can help, just like our Kazakh friends said, that, because a lot of time to get the procurement system right and need some, some assistance and others, I think is important to provide that. Also, as our colleagues talked about feasibility studies, so, we have a very good agency in the United States called USTDA, United States Trade and Development Agencies, which does a lot of, missions, American businesses to the region, the regional businesses to America, and then undertake a lot of feasibility studies. So we're also working with our colleagues there to make sure that this is sort of a holistic effort in providing the feasibility studies and even assistance to that end to facilitate and move beyond not only feasibility studies, but even beyond, so sort of a full project management, perhaps assistance and others. So taking two tracks on it. Now that's related to the budget issue as well. So we have committed budget to working on the operationalization of the technical side of sort of getting the right elements and the right certification. So I know the Undersecretary Keith Kroc from the State Department, he announced earlier $2-3 million just to get the operationalization set up. Then the question was how much budget actually is coming down, as Steve Dowd and as I mentioned, in the project themselves. So as you have kept track of things, the issue is for Blue Dot is to mobilize all the money that we do. So the big change that happened in our side of stuff is that we went from OPEC, which used to be our overseas investment bank, to DFC, now Development Finance Corporation. And in that case, we expanded the cap on it from 29 billion to 60 billion. So I think the 60 billion amount of money, most of that, when it goes into infrastructure, which is spoken broadly, not just transportation, most of that effort would be BDN. We would like to see it. And as you see Adam Bowler coming out, and the CEO of DFC, when he's come out to the region and talked about having regional funds, whether it be 3Cs or Caucasus or Central Asia or places like that, you know, it'd been very clear that most of that fund will go to projects which are sort of prospectively sort of blue dot projects to speak with. On the other hand, another important thing is that we also, you know, gave the reauthorization to our Exim Bank, our export. And so that particular bank, under very able leadership now, you know, that has an ability to market cap and realize of 120, 130 billion dollars. Now, that is as unlike, you know, our system of working is when we put one of the dollars from this, it leverages 3 to 4 times that amount of money in private sector, if not more at the minimum. So you can sort of look at it, it's a substantial amount of chunk of change that can get into these projects and look at it as we go forward. So so back to what do we do next? I think the important element is most interested countries ought to sort of, you know, be willing to sort of join and support the blue dot, which is a political commitment for good infrastructure investments and in attracting more private sector. That's one element. And the technical side, not only as we go forward on it, we're going to have, you know, we might look at institutions like OECD and others to help frame it where we are so we can build upon existing systems, but also have an important, you know, 2 advisory committees, one a private sector advisory committee and one would be a sort of a civil society one. So that the private sector is involved earlier on to say, hey, here are the ways that, like we are doing like today, you know, here are the ways where you can really, I presume it's timely, there is a place for it, and let me tell you how best to get to that place in getting where you need to go. So to that end, I mean, I would really like to follow up with Tale and see, hey, so because he's, you know, how the one of the hubs and the port that he has been so instrumental in getting up, how could that be a, you know, almost a test case for us, a pilot, an initial issue, and how we can come up with the right certification criteria as we go forward. So that's the long and short answer. And if I have left anybody out, I think feel free to ask questions or say to Efkan, who can tell me. But Efkan, if that's okay, I mean, I would be very keen to hear from our private industry, which is there, and I was just going to go and ask them as they are listed here, unless you suggest, I mean, coal-free industrial zone, it'd be nice to hear their thoughts on it. So if you are there and if you want to speak, please.
Yeah, thanks so much. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. And well, Potiphar Industrial Zone, the biggest free zone in Georgia, like 300 hectares, which is located literally next to the biggest port in Georgia, I mean the Potiphar Port, and to another player, Page Georgia, which is, by the way, has secured the some loan from the previous OPIC, now DFC, for building the new deep sea terminal there. Also, the Potiphar Port, which is owned by the Mark smaller daughter company APM, like terminal, they're in the process of securing the documentation from the government of Georgia to build a deep sea port. Given that in Georgia we didn't have any deep sea port so far, so we'll be located next to the first deep sea port in Georgia. We're the only free zone in Georgia where the government of Georgia hold the shares. And now, in terms of infrastructure, now we're like almost finalized our negotiations with government to connect the railway line from our free zone to the new port, which will be built, which will connect our free zone to port, which will give us the opportunity to like receive all the incoming and outgoing goods by way of kind of railway line. Also, as dear Ziad, you know, told, and I really want to appreciate him during his like during our visit in his free zone in early February this year, we're also looking and have the kind of this kind of desire to become the logistic hub, given that we have a huge amounts of land available. And basically, to be very concrete, we know which industries, I mean, which sectors prove to be successful in the free zone, given all these FTAs, free trade agreements that Georgia has signed with the CIC, like the European Union and Turkey and China. I mean, we know which sectors work in Georgia. We have made like a very short like a case studies, and we would really appreciate if Blue Dot Network would help us to find the potential investors who are engaged in this sector from these like Caspian countries. So this is shortly what we do, what our plans are, and thank you very much indeed for this opportunity.
Well, thanks a lot. And I know there's a question from Ms. Vafek from the Afghan Women's Chamber of Commerce. Over to you, Manida.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kosh. This is really great to be here today to hear about this new initiative. And I'm grateful that our embassy in Washington connected the private sector, us. It's me and Mr. Fazli from the International Chamber of Commerce, Afghanistan office today. So yeah, in Afghanistan as well, these days the private sector is very much interested in infrastructure, as all kinds of infrastructure, as you all spoke, free zones, transportation, telecommunication in Afghanistan, of course, it's not good, electricity, energy, and the only way so far for financing have been IFC. This is great to see that other options and other opportunities are available. My question was, of course, that what would it take for Afghanistan to become part of Blue this initiative, and what does it take for the Afghan private sector to really get their projects financed through this initiative? Or won't there be any restrictions, because Afghanistan's getting somewhat, especially here around the Central Asian countries. So whether that would be a restriction for us or not. Yeah, our private sector is interested to explore more possibilities of getting financed their various bigger projects and initiatives that they are planning.
Okay, well, thank you again for your question. You know, I have a special place in my heart for Afghanistan, having had the pleasure to be there for almost 3 years. And so I think what it takes is really President Ashraf Ghani to sort of welcome and, you know, make a comment on interest in joining the Blue Dot Network. As I said, politically, it's just a commitment to the ethos of it. I think that's pretty straightforward. And then you cut off a little bit about some restrictions on Afghanistan. So there are no a priori restrictions on any particular one country. So I wouldn't presume to have any particular restrictions. It is just literally, you have to, it's a project-based also initiative. So it's not a, you know, country says I'm okay and I would like to support this, but the project by project that you're looking at it. So in Afghanistan, we have several projects, and certainly a lot of those, we have the honor and the pleasure to be sort of able to support this, not only the ring road, the parts of the ring road, the other issues, the connections on railroad connections up to the north of Uzbekistan. There are issues always about energy products, whether it be NEPSEPs or other things that we have connecting the north or the southern energy pools, or with your neighbors. So there's a lot of opportunity there that we've already engaged in, and we have done it, all that stuff in good way. And I know that the President Ghani is very, very keen on the Lapis Lazuli track, or the connection through Turkmenistan over to Caspian, to something that Taleh was talking earlier about. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity all around this region. So I think the question really is, in some ways, you know, it's both simple and it doesn't have to get too complicated. There are good infrastructure projects in every country. There are people looking for good infrastructure projects in country with money. They need to find a system to merge this and do it in a responsible but an effective, practical way. That to the heart of it is, okay? That's the objective, because a need exists and we need to meet this need. Now, how best we do it, there's a political commitment which is absolutely essential. That's what I said. So you should ask all your countries to say, hey, we want you to get on board on this blue dot right away. Let's do it. That's just a political commitment. So then we'll help you with the procurement and the other stuff to get there. And then the other element really is that we try to, as my GE colleagues earlier said in the background, that it is ability to get the highlight and elevate. Let's just look at the Baku port. I mean, it really is an fascinating opportunity. We really want to know the world to know about it, not just the Caucasus region of what it is and how it provides the new version of sort of hubs and logistics. So how can we elevate that, and by elevating it, get more investment that we're having? So that's the gist of it. Now, how to do it? I want to say that it's that easy, but it is something that we should all participate and work to make it happen in as sort of practical and efficient a way as we can. So thank you again. It's really always a pleasure to have colleagues from Afghanistan. There's one more question from Emil from Ministry of Economy. I'll take that, I'll answer it, and then I'll turn it over to you, Kelly. I'm sorry, but I'll have to run to another call at 10. So over to you, Emil.
Good American morning. Good to see you again. It's rather a short intervention, and I would love to mirror to what my dear colleague Dr. Taleh said, saying that we fully support this hub and adding value type projects to our economy, and we are looking forward to do it with private sector investors, including from America. I just wanted to say one comment, which has to do with my personal impression that in many ways our markets are not very well aware of each other. And I would state a couple of examples. I've spent last decade in private sector, and when I got back to public service, I realized that, for example, EBRD, an excellent private sector development instrument, have somewhat moved its priorities, and it's now looking at the infrastructural and transport projects as well, something that they were not really doing many years ago. Or I came across a couple of projects in Georgia where OPIC was involved, and it was a nice and pleasant surprise to understand that OPIC liberalized the rules about American element of the projects, and it's now much easier to work with OPIC. But as you know, in a way, a market representative, I didn't know about. So what I think the Blue Dot Network's function could be is to fix this informational gap, to help markets know each other a bit better. And I would suggest that you consider this as an activity direction for this very representative and strong network.
All right. Well, thanks again, Emil. And I know that I don't mind. Yes, I'm introducing you, Javier. Just simmer down, simmer down. I have some patience. So now it's my pleasure to turn over to my good friend Javier, who is the most anxious, enthusiastic, energetic champion of Central Asia and all of USAID and US government. So I think over to you. That he has now been, he's in charge of our entire Asia Bureau. And so I couldn't have greater pleasure to turn it to him, and look forward to working with all you guys on the sort of expansion of the Blue Dot Network. And one important story about where the name Blue Dot comes is really important. I was telling Caleb to say it. So this comes from Carl Sagan's point of view, that as he was going on, and we had when we were the Voyager and the shuttles were going out towards the space, they turned around and looked back to our planet, and they found that, you know, in the big dark sky, there was this little pale blue dot is what all the planet Earth looked like. And this is the place that all of us live. This is the place, the only home that we know. And so it's upon us that we take care of it with as much as we can. And in so doing, making sure that our infrastructure development, which is very critical, is done so responsibly. So with that, thank you again, Caspian Policy Center, and over to my good friend Javier Piedra. And I look forward to working with you guys. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, Kosh, I just wanted to, and to Efkan, I noticed that you have to run off, and I really want to thank Kosh for all he's doing in this particular area, because he has an uncanny ability to synthesize. And that's a talent that is very rare. He can pull together not only information, but summarize it so that it's very and totally intelligible. So that's something that I wanted to mention, as well as to thank, and we're not closing up. I see that Kosh had to leave, and I just wanted to say that before he did. And then also to Efkan and the Caspian Policy Center. That's, you know, we've organized this, and this is a topic, the Blue Dot Network, infrastructure, connectivity, that we will continue to pursue aggressively, not only in Central Asia, but across Asia. So back to you, Kosh or Efkan. Over.
Thank you, Javier. And once again, congratulations on your new position. It's good to partner with you on this, and Kosh as well. Here, I'd like to turn to our dear Ambassador Bob Sikuta to take over the moderation of the discussion. Bob, microphone is with you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate what Kosh was doing. And I think, again, the important thing here is to sort of hear from the private sector and to hear these questions. I think, you know, sort of building on the comments that were made earlier, as the U.S. side, the U.S. government tries to move ahead with this, we need input. And so these questions are very useful. And so in that line, I'd like to recognize Zandros Timirgali of the Kazakh Investment to ask his question. Please, go ahead.
Dear participants, good evening and good morning to everyone. Thank you for organizing this business event. I think as Caspian Policy Center is a unique and precious platform for uniting U.S. and significant countries of the Caspian region, all of the countries of Central Asia and South Caucasus. So we appreciate the efforts on covering essential issues of the region and worldwide. So the key advantages of Kazakhstan and the Central Asia and the Greater Caspian is its favorable geographical position between Europe and Asia, which predetermines its significant transport and logistics potential. Strategically, it links the large, fast-growing markets. It's, by the way, 65% of the world's GDP of China and Southeast Asia, and those of Middle East, Western Europe, by all types of transportation. And the countries of Central Asia and North Caucasus are very important participants of Belt and Road initiatives. Just to highlight, transcontinental transportation allows transferring goods from China to Europe 3 to 4 times faster. It's 15 days by railroads and 10 days by highway, than by sea. So multimodal transportation as well. The country has tremendous access to the markets of more than 500 million of consumers. And also we see, last years, we see the increasing volumes on transit traffic from China to Europe, from Southeast Asia to Middle East and Europe. And you see vast improvements in infrastructure, both dry ports and sea ports. We have Horgoz Eastern Gate Port in Kazakhstan, and we have marine ports, and we should mention all the ports in the Caspian Sea in Azerbaijan and Georgia. Here I would like to bring your attention more closer to the Caspian routes. This direction is expanding rapidly, but still largely remains unexplored because most of the cargo goes from the sea routes and from the land corridor from China to Eastern Europe. A Trans-Caspian route allows to deliver cargo quickly and effectively from inner parts of China and the Middle East and the Black Sea towards Europe. And there are such logistics hubs as Horgoz Gateway, Poti, Baku, and many others. In a given context, it connects Southeast Asia and Middle East with the Eurasian countries. Investing in the transport logistics infrastructure along the Caspian, Trans-Caspian, is firstly high margin, and what is crucial, it provides safe and low risk path comparing to the alternative routes. So talking about infrastructure projects and the opportunities that BDN offers. So in terms of our experience in collaboration with DFC in EBRD and other international organizations, there are a large volume of structured finance, institutional finance available there, but in the region there's a lack of bankable projects. It's obvious. So there is enormous scope of work, and maybe we should together work in this direction in terms of creating bankable projects, because the potential is tremendous and the directions are obvious. So we have transports, we have energy, we have food production and other sectors, but we have lack of the projects. So BDN is a tremendous opportunity for the countries of the region to implement a new high-level investment projects. So we are ready to integrate the opportunity of BDN into our investment attraction infrastructure. So we need more information, and we are ready to transmit to both the government and private sectors of Kazakhstan in order to utilize this great opportunity. So thank you, Mr. Chikuda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timirgali. And I think that's also an important point you made about your readiness to sort of move ahead and talking on this with the Kazakhstan government. Javier, if I may suggest, I'll take a few more questions, then maybe we'll turn it back over to you to sort of respond. We have a few in the queue here. With that, I'd like to turn to Mr. Temur Tagiev. Sorry, my Azerbaijani is slipping on me. You have a question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, thank you very much for such an opportunity. Like, first of all, it's not only a question, basically it's a comment. Because I represent Nexo Holding, which is one of the largest private businesses in Azerbaijan with active partnerships in Kazakhstan and Georgia. And it's great to know about a Blue Dot network, such a great initiative that can support private businesses and our countries. And also, like previous speakers mentioned, a potential impact of private businesses and private investments in our region. So therefore, I would like to mention that there are already some projects which fit exactly the profile of Blue Dot network. And I'm talking about the project which is developed by Nexo Holding with our partners in Kazakhstan and Georgia. And I'm talking about the Digital Silkway. Now, like previous speakers has mentioned a lot about a great potential region for logistics and transportation. And at the same time, I would like to mention that our region has huge potential for digital infrastructure development as well. And our project aims to connect Asia to Europe via like Kazakhstan, Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and then Black Sea in Europe. And it's not a pure initiative. It's already a project which is up and running. Like, as you might know, in March 2019, government of Azerbaijan signed an intergovernmental agreement with the government of Kazakhstan, allowing a construction of subsea fiber optic cable to be laid in the Caspian Sea. It's a kind of historic milestone which was achieved about a year ago. A bit later, a similar agreement was signed between the governments of Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. So those agreements basically laid the foundation for the construction of subsea fiber optic, which will be a kind of critical link, providing a direct connection of Central Asia to Europe via Azerbaijan and Georgia. Why I mention that? Because once again, here we're talking about the project which is already, I mean, in place. It already got support of the governments of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. We have a great interest from like some private investors from abroad, but we've never been aware of such a great initiative as Blue Network. And I believe that there should be more interaction between such initiatives and private business because we can help each other. Again, talking about our project, I mean, we have a partnership, like the Trans-Caspian project is delivered by a joint venture between Azer Telecom, which is a subsidiary of Nexol, and Trans Telecom, which is a leading mobile and internet transit operator in Kazakhstan. So, and we believe it will start actual construction in 2021, 2022. Also, as a part of that, like in 2019, our company acquired Caucasus Online, which was a Georgian mobile operator having the only subsea cable connecting Georgia to Europe, like to Bulgaria, basically. So why I'm mentioning that? Because this project has a huge potential for our region. And I'm talking about immense benefits that can be delivered to economies of both Azerbaijan and Georgia. Like the colleague has mentioned the benefits of Georgia, which is already mentioned as a hub in the in the Black Sea, serving Caucasus as well. And again, Caucasus Online is a company which is serving the whole Caucasus region and partially even Middle East. But now I'm talking about a project. I mean, we like to draw a parallel with Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, because this project, I mean, Digital Silk Road project has three crucial elements. We have Kazakhstan element, Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan, and finally we have Georgia, because it's kind of also vital element to get the final connectivity to Europe. I mean, again, that's just the first part, because we're moving forward. Yes, there's some certain difficulties, some misunderstandings that may happen with any project, but I hope that we'll find also an understanding with Georgian government and get the full support of Georgian government for this great initiative as well. And once again, I believe that those projects can become a good starting point for such initiatives as Blue Dot, because they're supported by private business, they're supported by governments, but they need to have more coordination even with international finance institutions. So now, I mean, talking about my second comment, I mean, you know, we're looking for a kind of governance tool which can help private businesses in such programs. Like, how can we get to know more about Blue Dot Network? Like, what I would suggest, maybe it's a good idea to create some kind of steering committee with representatives of private businesses from Kazakhstan, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. Like, it can be in the format of advisory council or steering committee. Because, I mean, first of all, I mean, as Jandos has mentioned, we're looking for projects. And again, private businesses in our countries also have money to invest. Like, we would be willing and ready to invest in Georgia. And actually, we're already investing in Georgia. As you might know, Azerbaijan is like the largest investor in Georgian economy. And we'd like to continue to do so. We have like friends and partners in Kazakhstan looking for projects like across the globe. So again, let's create a kind of governance mechanism which will allow us to exchange information, to do project screening, and then to have access to IFIs. You know, in this case, you like, first of all, we'll delete, like, let's say, non-competitive projects. And also that governance agency or governance tool will help to act as a moderator between private businesses and governments. I mean, it's just kind of initiative from our side. And I believe that this initiative will be supported by private businesses in all our countries. And I'm talking about Kazakhstan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, probably like Turkmenistan and Afghanistan. Why not? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you also, you raised a good point. Having spent a number of years dealing with oil pipelines and gas pipelines, we need 21st century infrastructure as well. And the internet and fiber optic cables are crucial to that, and crucial to the kinds of things we're talking about, and kind of the synergy among the other types of infrastructure out there, and providing a basis for future economic growth. If I could now turn the microphone over to Hojat Fazli of the International Center of Commerce in Afghanistan.
Well, thank you very much. I see some faces are quite familiar, and it's glad to see some of those, especially I see Azad from Georgia. We met once in Uzbekistan in Termez, was last year, basically, where we were visiting a Uzbek port in Cluj, proximity of Afghanistan, that they have developed interesting infrastructures. I think if we look at the situation here in Afghanistan since 2002, one of the main focuses of the international community and the donors in Afghanistan was basically to address the necessity for closer trade ties between Afghanistan and Central Asia. And then a substantial part of this effort was basically to develop this Afghanistan focused rehabilitation for cross-border trade with Central Asia and in the region. And of course, because of this strategic location for the country that we have, is not only sort of like a gateway for the South Asia, but we also have our own traditional and strategic trade relations with Central Asia as well. So I think if we sort of focus on succeeding a project, what we have been discussing so far is also really necessary to develop other parts of that as well. I mean, if we look at the whole region, not only Central but South Asia as well, it's sort of like this chain that needs every single ring should be well connected, and of course Afghanistan between those two continents or the regions is having that important role. So I would follow up on the question which was asked by Ms. Wafik, that it's really necessary that Afghanistan should be at the center of all these discussions, and it should not be left out. It should be rather the main point of connection and the main point of connectivity between Central and South Asia. And having said that, private sector in Afghanistan is really working. Just last week, we had an investment show in Dubai where we launched almost 17 infrastructure projects, which are quite ready for investment, and we believe that developing those projects would significantly facilitate investment in the country, not only for the domestic investor, but also for foreign investors as well, which I would love to share that list of projects we have our embassy in DC with all participants of our today's event. And apart from that, I would just like to have a minor comment that when we have these sort of discussions and that we would like to focus on the region, and then we, I've been hearing quite interesting stories from Azerbaijan, Baku, from Georgia, from Kazakhstan, from other countries in the region, that how much have they been working to develop the sort of infrastructures for investment. But I think we should also consider the fact that Afghanistan is also one of those important countries, if not economically important, but at least, I mean, strategically and geographically important country in the region, that we should take into consideration, that we should extend our discussion to that part of the country as well. So thank you very much. That was a minor comment from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to now turn the floor over to our colleague, Elena Son, to make some points.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador and Evgan and everybody else who organized this, this very important and timely discussion. And I would like to especially thank Bella Ferenczi, our member, GE, who not only sits on the board of directors of the American Uzbekistan Chamber of Commerce, but also a founding member of the US Kyrgyzstan Business Council, US Tajikistan Business Council, and a driving force behind the US Afghanistan Business Initiative. Just to echo what our friend Hojat Fazli said, indeed, Afghanistan does serve as a very strong component in our company's presence and operations in Central Asia. Of course, each of our councils are bilateral, and therefore we address issues on a bilateral basis. However, there is a lot of regional cooperation going on. We, of course, applaud the governments of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan, and support from the government of Kyrgyzstan to strengthen that. The way we look at it as a business group that represents exclusively American companies in Central Asia since 1993, we're actually the oldest one in DC among the former Soviet Union countries. American companies are certainly the glue that connects the region, the US government, and Central Asian governments. We would applaud the thorough discussions between Central Asian governments and the US government. We would also caution that we would like for all the nuances and sensitivities to be ironed out before the system is implemented, because at the end of the day, it will fall on the shoulders of the private sector, be it American or Central Asian, to implement the projects. And we certainly do not want to have any disagreements or any challenges in implementation of this. And of course, if there is a roundtable that includes the private sector, both Central Asian as well as Americans, where the private sector's views are inclusive, that will be highly supported by our group. And I think that although we wouldn't want to see any legal disputes or any arbitrations, but of course, there need to be a channel for companies, again, be it private in Central Asia or American companies, to have an appeal system where any disagreements or where any differences of views on technicalities, on the geography, on the finances, be resolved in a collegial way. And again, we applaud the effort, but we would also like to be very practical, because business is business. And sometimes there are challenges and we would like them to be resolved. We do not want to be stuck on that. And I think that the thirdly one is, I think earlier on it was emphasized the transparency of funding. We would also like to emphasize access to funding, which is critical to our company's strong presence, American companies' presence in Central Asia. So again, thank you so much for this discussion, and our companies, our members would gladly participate in further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. Those are good points. I'd like to, at this point, since we're coming up to the end of our time, maybe turn the floor over to Caleb from DFC, if he's on, if he's still with us online here, to maybe make some comments and try to bring us home. Caleb?
I think Javier is on the line from USAID.
Oh, okay. Well, Javier, do you want to make some concluding comments here?
Sure, thank you. As I said earlier, first and foremost, I'd like to thank the Caspian Policy Center for pulling this together. We had the initial one 10, 15 days ago, where we discussed with the government and government officials the importance of the Blue Dot Network, and now the equal partner is the private sector, of course, in this entire process, because as was summarized earlier, Kosh had mentioned, and he summarized it in such a great way, that we need to marry the projects, because there are very many projects and opportunities in Central Asia and in the Caucasus, with the project managers and the investors, or the folks who finance these. And the Blue Dot Network is a vehicle by which we can do that. And so the more we hear, the more the Blue Dot Network folks hear about the needs of the private sector, the better we can respond to those requirements. And very often it's a matter of just getting the information to the right quality information. I guess that's really, and the quality information to the folks who have the resources. So we certainly hope to continue this dialogue, and I personally would like to extend it beyond Central Asia and the Caucasus, but into the rest of Asia. Certainly Afghanistan, it is a pivotal country, as well as all the way to the port of Batumi, out in Georgia and beyond into the Black Sea and across Turkey, etc. So the whole region is critically important, and we should swing south across the Central Asia into Afghanistan and down into India. So there's so much that we can do here, and I am certainly grateful to you, Ambassador, and to Efgan at the Caspian Policy Center for organizing this, for all of the representatives who are here listening. We had a lot of folks on the line, and that is very good, because we can now take this to another level. So USAID supports this, obviously, and we will continue to work with folks who support Blue Dot Network. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Javier. Thanks for those comments. Efkan, do you want to make any closing remarks?
Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Bob. And thanks everyone for attending this event. Before I perhaps close this event, I'd like to tell you that we have a form available, Google document that we sent to everyone. You guys can, the representatives of businesses can fill out that form about your further interest about the Blue Dot Network. We will be happy to engage you after the event. It's available and it was sent to the webinar channels to everyone. All the attendees. We had over, at some point, 100 attendees. I'm glad to see that interest. Some self-promotion here for the organization here. I'd like to turn also to our embassy colleagues. If there's anyone who wants to comment, I see that Tornike is there, Orkan is there, before I close the event.
Thank you, Efkan. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Caspian Policy Center and the USAID for this excellent event, second in the series of BDN. Just a short comment that it's really important in the region that the new added value is the connectivity between the countries and different regions, Azerbaijan being the centerpiece between those international connectivity initiatives. As well as the new added value is the public-private sector partnership, which the initiatives like BDN put an emphasis on. Before, of course, moving forward, as previous speakers say, that a couple of issues remains as how the BDN certification scheme will work and how the BDN eligibility mechanism will apply, as well as the key partners like XCIM and DFC eligibility requirement, as well as the US content requirement will fit into the BDN mechanism. So I think we need to sort out all those questions, which I'm sure will arise from the private sector, at least from our Azerbaijan private sector, which was also raised by the previous speakers. We need to sort out all those problems. So thank you once again, Efkan and USAID and Ambassador Security for this facility.
Thanks. Anyone else from the embassies here? Okay. Onur Shailan from Turkish Embassy.
Thank you so much, Efkan. Good morning to you all and good afternoon to the colleagues in the region. Thanks for this excellent event to the CPC and all the participants. I also believe that it was a very useful exchange of views on a very important initiative called BDN, and it highlighted that we need to increase our cooperation and information exchange in the future. There were a couple of useful ideas to do that, like establishment of a forum and so on. I think CPC would be very instrumental in continuing this exchange of information. We are looking forward to support all the initiatives of the CPC with regard to BDN. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Shailan.
Efkan, if I may. Yeah, thank you, colleagues. Thanks, CPC. I'm sorry, I have some problems with the video camera. It was working and now I cannot turn it on, but yeah, thanks all of you. Thank you, USAID, and also our colleagues from EBRD. It was very interesting discussion. I hope that it was useful for our colleagues from the private sector, and these kind of initiatives are very important for private sector representatives, and I hope that we make sure our embassies as well as CPC engagement will make sure that it will be useful for the private sector in the Caspian region. For the Georgian representatives, me, myself, as well as my colleagues from the embassy and also this Afghan and CPC team will be glad and honored to cooperate in you in the future in regards to any questions or opportunities which BDN can offer for the private sector in our country. Thank you once again, and I'm looking forward to our future cooperation.
Thank you, Tornike. And here I'd like to remind you, everyone, that if you have further questions and would like to get in touch with the CPC, you can always email us at info@caspianpolicy.org. Once again, I'd like to especially thank to our USAID colleagues and CPC colleagues and our team here for putting this event together, and also all the embassies who worked with us. We look forward for our future events. We have actually one coming on the 7th of October on the women empowerment in the Caspian region. We'll be sending invitations in coming days. Once again, thanks everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in our future events. Thank you.